Hey guys, this is GamerCard. Welcome to another Pokemon Trading Card Game History video. This time we're on to the second set of our Sword and Shield block. The last set before rotation is supposed to happen. Rebel Clash. As you can see from the front here, all of the starter Pokemon are getting their VMAXs in the set. We did have the prelude to this in the previous promo pack, where we had the regular Pokemon V. This time we'll actually go over them, because they're all at least somewhat relevant. We also have the access to Toxtricity, as you see over here. I think this came out around about the same time that the G-Max was available in-game. I know that wasn't immediately accessible, so I think this might have been that time. Kind of a cool Pokemon nonetheless. There's a little bit over 200 cards in this set, but there's enough to speak on. I think there's more interesting Pokemon in this set than there were in the last one. And, well, there are quite a few interesting item cards and stuff in particular for this set as well. That, you know, typical sort of second set stuff. There's some really interesting traits to the cards here as well. Some great artwork appreciations on here as well. Some of these that we won't be going over. The Savour, I think, is actually particularly cool. It usually is, but still. Like, Snorlax is just cute, picking up the stuff off of the tree there. Surprised the tree's not falling over, to be honest. We have things like Arcanine is really neat up here. The Magmortar is really fun to see. And Ludicolo's just got a bit of a dynamic background thing going on. Kinda like it. Not all of these cards, of course, are very good. A lot of the ones I just mentioned there are not going to show up in the interest pools that we have over here. Might be wondering why these are all next to each other. We'll talk about that very briefly as we go through, because they all share a theme. That's why I've kind of picked them out here. Otherwise, it's by dex entry down here, but we have items and trainers and stuff to go over first, so let's go for that. Capacious Bucket is a really cool item card if you remember Professor's Letter from Generation 6. This is specific to water energy, but lets you search up to 2 instead of the single energy that an energy search or a spinner would get you on most turns. Obviously going second on your first turn, this is technically weaker than Energy Spinner, but you're always going to see this get played instead because it is just much more powerful in general. Very, very good with Inteleon and Frostmoth as the ideal stuff. So Lapras could also get played with this as well, but I think the Inteleon from this set, which we'll talk about later on, is maybe a little bit more powerful in general. Pokeball is noteworthy because we would have actually played this more out of desperation than anything, but we would have played this if it was available after the 2019 rotation, like 2020 season started, but it actually got rotated out of the format until now. So yeah, there are a couple of decks that played a couple copies of this actually. It may come up. I doubt it, but if we really need more basic search, because Quick Ball isn't always enough, this could actually happen. So yeah, keep it in mind, I suppose. Scoop Up Net is insane, and there's a lot of nasty combinations with it in Expanded, because it does not predate the Pokemon GX stuff, so it's like Gen 6 and below it kind of works with, and then later on, current year, if it was still legal, you'd be able to use the Gen 9 EXs as well. Put one of your Pokemon that isn't a V or a GX Pokemon into your hand. Discard all the attached cards. It is like base set Scoop Up, except it pulls all of the evolution line back into the hand as well. The original Scoop Up only picked up the basic Pokemon if you had an evolution line attached to it, so it was good, really good, but not great for all of the stuff you would want to use it on. This is much more universal. The obvious immediate thing to look at with this is the Galarian Zigzagoon. Any coming into play power is going to be ridiculous with this, but Zigzagoon in particular is really nice because it lets you do the Crobat Poke-Turn thing and ping more damage around. We've seen how good that was back in Gen 4, so we have that back. But also, because it picks up evolution lines, things like the Inteleon engine way into the future actually make tons of use out of this as well. Right now, in this set, we're going to see this used with Jirachi quite a lot too, because Jirachi GX sort of pivots away from the escape board type of thing, and ends up using this a ton more. It's actually really strong. Tool Scrapper is a really good card to have back in the format. This tool removal stuff is something we haven't really had good access to. Faber, or if you're playing a Dart deck, Dangerous Drill were the only options that we had before. Dart decks were not the strongest in general though, so really it was only Faber as a supporter card to remove tools, and that made things like the Snorlax in the previous set very difficult to deal with, because 390 HP, super hard to beat in one go. Tool Scrapper is an interesting reprint over Field Blower because it means we don't have the stadium discard that we used to have as well. So they clearly thought that was too powerful of an effect, and I kind of agree, to be honest with you. I think the stadium thing should be separate, so that's where we are. Very good card to have. Hopefully stays in format for a very long time to come. Boss's Orders is the new version of Lysander from Generation 6. Lysander actually has a Boss's Orders version as well. This has been compartmentalized the same way that Professor's Research has, so we have several different bosses that we can choose from. I believe Cyrus, Lysander, and Getsis are the current ones, but there will be more in the future. This card isn't going anywhere. If you've not seen this, it is the original Gust of Wind on a supporter card. Switch your opponent's bench with one of their active, which means that we now have access to a reliable way to gust the opponent, which is great because it's balanced by the fact that it's on a supporter card. That can sometimes be in its favor too. We have a recovery card for this set, which is good, but it means that you can't play this alongside a draw support in the same turn. You have to use like Pokemon abilities and stuff to do that. So yeah, very balanced card, love to see it. Whichever version we play is going to be like unique to the person, I think, and that's kind of neat. Olena is a weird card. You discard 2 of the other cards in your hand when you play this, look at the opponent's hand and bottom deck a trainer that you find there. It's fine, you'll see it in stun/control-y sort of decks. I think Dragapult was one that I saw it in a little bit, but I'm not a super fan of it there, to be fair. But yeah, anytime that you can see what the opponent is doing and potentially put a supporter card that they need next turn to the bottom of the deck is interesting, to say the least. It's a heavy cost on this though, so don't expect it to show up too often. Skylar makes a return here, which is intriguing. There's going to be another full art Skylar later on. It's not in this set, weirdly enough, but that's kind of fine. It's not commonly played, of course, because it is a bit slow. Such a deck for just any trainer is awkward. Inteleon engines will often outclass this, but Inteleon doesn't see much play until later on. So yeah, I don't know, maybe you'll see it, but I wouldn't count on it. We generally have better options overall. Speaking of having better options, Sonia is a weaker version of Roseanne's Research from Generation 4, and that really sucks because I think this one deserved better. Search your deck for up to 2 basic Pokemon or up to 2 basic energy cards, reveal them, put them into the hand. The or is the problem. Roseanne's Research was 2 in combination of these categories, and the inflexibility makes it very difficult to justify here. It's either Pokemon Fan Club or it's Professor's Letter. Neither of which are particularly strong enough in the format where you can't play a supporter going first, but it does see very occasional play. I have seen lists that play a couple of this. Not a fan of it, but I can see it if you really need a ton of Pokemon down, and Quick Ball is not good enough to do it. We have a special energy in this set that I think outclasses that though, if you can afford to play it. Stadium cards! Galamine is pretty cool. It makes the retreat cost of both active Pokemon 2 higher, so this, unlike the Absol, does not require the Pokemon to be basic only, but it also stacks with the Absol. And there is Pokemon in this set, and also a Tangrowth from before, that increases its damage based on the retreat cost of the Pokemon. So for that deck, it is really good. This also makes it much more difficult for Jirachi decks to play a Skateboard as their main out now for switching around, because if Galar Mine goes into play, just like the Absol, it kind of stops them from retreating for free. So that makes that sort of engine a lot more difficult to play as well. Training Court is pretty cool. I don't remember if there's been a version of this since Gen 2, but this is a stronger version of the Energy Stadium that I played in the Ho-Oh Venusaur deck all the way back in Expedition. That one required a coin flip to do the same effect as this, which is turn player can put a basic energy from their discard into the hand. You'll see this an awful lot later on with Inteleon stuff as well, because you often discard energy with that to do like Inteleon VMAX's double gunner in the Rapid Strike stuff, so you can see this recover the energy as well. Very strong. Can also use it in things like welder boxes and stuff as well, but I think Fire Crystal will generally outdo it, and you'll probably just want to play Giant Hearth instead there. So yeah, cool card though. Turffield is a really good stadium for the grass Pokemon, especially this set. There's a fantastic grass deck in this one. Search your deck for an evolution grass Pokemon once per turn. Obviously very good with the Rillaboom that we saw in the previous set. Being evolution grass, not like stage 1 or stage 2 grass, means you can search VMAXs with this as well, which is very good. And yeah, grass has got a lot of good support at this point, with Rowlet and the Alolan Executor being able to evolve stuff as well. We are absolutely seeing the Rillaboom VMAX deck in this set because it's just more than good enough to see. Tool cards, there's only a couple and neither of them are super good. Burning Scarf makes it so that if your active fire Pokemon gets damaged from an opponent's attack, then you burn them, which is 2 damage counters immediately on them. That's kind of okay, I suppose. A bit like Rocky Helmet, except it might do some more damage if the Tails Flip comes in. The problem is there isn't really a good reason to use this over something like a Big Charm or really any other tool card that you could conceive of. Even Air Balloon, because a lot of fire types have got 2 energy to retreat costs and whatnot. There is an Arcanine in the set that gains 100 extra HP if it has this equipped to it, but it only does 130 damage for free energy. Not nearly enough to care about. Big HP totals, but then Tool Scrapper could just delete it anyway. Curse Shovel, if it didn't read Knocked Out, this would probably be pretty good, but the fact of you have to have your Pokemon KO by damage from the opponent's attack to trigger this makes it unplayable. It discards the top 2 cards of the opponent's deck, so in theory, in a mill deck this could work. There is a Power Sand in this set that for 2 colorless energy mills the top card from the opponent, but if this is attached to it, mills 3 instead. But that's just not nearly good enough. It's a stage 1, it takes 2 colorless energy as well, so yeah. Special Energy is eaten good in this set, all of them are actually fantastic. Capture Energy is a successor to Call Energy from back in Gen 4. When you attach this colorless energy to one of your Pokemon, any of your Pokemon, search your deck for a basic and put it onto the bench. So I like this so much more than Call Energy because nowadays I think we can often facilitate a colorless in the energy cost a lot better. This is technically searchable by Guzma Hala as well, which makes it pretty respectable in any deck that's still playing some tag team stuff, and it doesn't have to be attached to the active. Also doesn't end your turn immediately too, so you can play this and then get a basic and then play like a Sycamore or something and work from there. Really good stuff, to be honest. Fun times. The type energies from Generation 6 return here, but they return in a slightly different way. They can be attached to any Pokemon this time round, and they will provide their typed energy, but they only provide a benefit if they are attached to the correct type of Pokemon. So in this case, Horror Psychic Energy provides a Psychic Energy whilst it's on a Pokemon. It is always a typeless energy in the hand. You cannot use an energy acceleration ability other than Porygon Z to accelerate this in the hand. But if it's on a Psychic Pokemon in the active spot damaged by an attack, you put 2 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. Rocky Helmet on an energy card doesn't sound the best, but it's really useful for the Dragapult deck in this set, and I guess any Psychic deck that can afford the space would like this. Malamar doesn't really want it though, because it can't accelerate this thing, so it depends what you're using really. Speed Lightning is an insane buff for the Pikarom deck because it really needed to get stronger, right? If you attach this to a Lightning Pokemon, you draw 2 cards. Just wow. This is not optional, however, so you may deck yourself out at the end of the game if you're not careful. But yeah, just being able to draw in addition to getting energy in play is absurd. And there's a very good lightning Pokemon that we can see in that bottom pile over there, which we are going to use this with religiously. Very strong. Finally, we have Twin Energy, which is kind of insane, and I really do wish this was evergreen just with the rule box instead of VOGX printed on it. It is double colorless energy, but only if it's attached to something which isn't a Pokemon VOGX. So no tag team stuff. You still get one energy if you put it on there, but it means that you can't use this on like a Mewtwo and Mew to pay for some of the other like super expensive attacks or whatever. And it cannot be used on Pokemon V Max either. The thing with the way that it's worded with Pokemon V, it also means anything that has like V Max, V Star sort of stuff on it as well. It's kind of like a Yu-Gi-Oh ruling that way, but yeah, Pokemon V Max are still Pokemon V, so it cannot be used to provide, you know, double colorless on those as well. Just a little rulings heads up. I wish this card existed in every format because, and from now on, at least for the time being, because realistically, single prizes needed all the help that they can get. And I think maybe if one or two of them, or like if it was designed around, if one or two of them had this in the current format, we'd see a lot more single prize stuff being played, and it would be a lot more interesting. So yeah. Just quickly go over the category that I have over here. These are coming into play sort of things. Effectively, these are if you draw them for turn, do a thing. Nugget is only playable if you draw it for turn, and then you draw 3 cards on an item card. So that's pretty strong, but it's got to be the... it's like, oh god, who is he called? The Palladium Oracle Mahad, I think it is, from... or like Rank Up Magic, the 7th one from Yu-Gi-Oh! Where if you draw at the start of the turn, then it's the only time it can do a thing. The Pokemon that we have here are all stage 1s. Got Lombre, Luxio, and Lampent, and the thing that's important about them is if you draw them for turn, you can bench them immediately at the start of the turn. So, it's a way of cheating the evolutions out a little bit more. Unfortunately, Ludicolo is not good enough with this, but this is still maybe worth noting because of the Ludicolo that comes out all the way, I don't remember exactly which set, but it comes out later that's really good with a Suicune deck, so that could be worth noting. The Luxio would be good because there is a good Luxray from this set, but it gets outclassed by the Disconnect Luxio that we had before because that has item lock on it, so bit unfortunate for him. And then Lampent is noteworthy because you could Duskstone the Lampent that you top entried into play and get that Chandelure out straight away, but the Chandelure from this set is really bad. I don't think we have a good one with an ability from the previous set that's in format, and the the Spirit Juggler dude is just RNG incarnate, so not particularly strong there. Still, it's an interesting gimmick. I kind of wish they did a little bit more with it, but maybe it's for the best that they didn't, because they're all kind of bulk filler. Speaking of, for now, Caterpie and Metapod are bulk filler themselves, but they do have the adaptive evolution trait. We've seen this before. It's always tempered by the fact that there isn't a good Butterfree to go into. That is still currently true, but in a much later set, I don't remember which one, but maybe Fusion Strike? In a later set before this rotates, there is a Butterfree that will triple status the opponent when you evolve into it. So with that and like Scoop Up Net and stuff, there's a deck there which I will play in the future. So we will get to see these, just not until we get a good Butterfree. Ninetales V is a really cool Pokemon. This one lets you copy one of the opponent's attacks for fire and the double colors. 200 HP on a Pokemon V is a little frail, but it's still bulkier than any of the basic GXs and stuff that we had before, so that's kind of neat. It does have a second attack as well. If you put an extra colorless on this thing, it will do 180, discard 1 energy from this Pokemon. So if the opponent doesn't have an attack that's worth copying, or something you can't use, like discard grass energy, or does damage per lightning energy, something like that, then you can still do Flamethrower, and it's not too bad in the slightest. So yeah, really good for the Welder Box type decks, and also the Colossal from this set that we'll talk about later on. Galarian Meowth often actually sees play without having any Berserker available because it reads discard 2 from your hand to use this ability. Sometimes that's all you actually need, because being able to discard cards and then, like, mostly energy, right? You discard like energy and you can accelerate them later on, but if you do discard 2, it lets you search your deck, so you also get a prize check as well when you do this at the start of the game, and you can get a Berserker out of the deck and put it into the hand. If you do have Berserker, this is a pretty cool card to have. Like, Steely Spirit is not a bad ability after all, but yeah, you'll often see this as a one-off just because discarding stuff is actually really key for certain decks. So, yeah. Galarian Weezing is a bot and a half that we are going to have to deal with later when Boost Shape comes out. One thing to note about this Pokemon is that it does not evolve from a Galarian Coughing, because that does not exist. So this can actually currently use the Psychic-type Coughings that we have from the previous generation. It does not have to use the Dark-type one that's in this set, which is pretty good for the moment. Later on, we're going to get a Dark-type one that has Ascension, so that's going to kind of trump this, but still, pretty solid. 130 HP and the Neutralizing Gas ability here. If this is active, the opponent doesn't have any abilities, so when we get to evolve this before the opponent can take a turn, it's going to be disgusting. For now, it's like fine. It does stop abilities that nothing else can, so that's pretty good, but jury's out as to whether or not it's going to be good enough here. Severe Poison for a Dark Energy quadruple poisons the opponent's active. That's fine and all, and I mean, technically there's Toxicroak from the previous set that you could damage buff it with. That's way too clunky though, so it's not going to do a ton of damage, and it's a bit too heavy for a hit and run card because we don't have Floatstone, so you still have to pay energy to retreat this guy, but it's pretty strong, and neutralizing the opponent's abilities is always good, so we'll see it at some point for sure. Galarian Mr. Rime is a cool artwork card. It has the Mist Energy effect from the next set coming out. If any of your Pokemon have got energy attached to them, they cannot be affected by effects of the opponent's attacks. It does have to have energy on, which is kind of frustrating, because it means that you can't protect everything unless you spread your energy super thin, but it's still pretty good. You can still block out stuff like any auto KOs, any damage counter placements can get stopped, things like gusting effects often get blocked as well, so there's a fair few things. Auto paralysis is another one, right? So some cool stuff you could do with that. Gengar Jump Scare coming in again here. Galarian Cursola is a stage 1 version of the Stormfront Gengar, except its attack really sucks, and that kind of makes it unplayable. But for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, Perish Body is basically Fainting Spell. If this is in the active spot, gets KO'd by damage from an attack, you flip a coin, and if heads, the attacker is also knocked out. So really annoying against the multi-prizer decks that don't really have good ways of getting around this. Damage counter placement can obviously be a problem, but realistically its attack is just too bad, right? For a Psychic and a Colorless, you do 60 and the opponent can't retreat next turn. That is irritating, but with how many Switch cards get played at the moment, it's just never going to stick. So, not particularly good, I'm afraid. Milotic is probably one of the best Milotics we've ever had outside of the Energy Grace one, right? 210 HP, 2 retreat, reasonable enough. For a Water and a Welder, Water double colorless, you do 10 plus 50 for each colorless in the opponent's active's retreat cost. So by base, most Pokemon have got a 2 or a 3 retreat, so it's not going to do that much, only 110 to 160, but with Galar Mine, that's 100 damage that gets buffed up here. If the opponent is a basic, then you can use Absol to buff it up even further, and that's pretty respectable. It can actually get to like 260, maybe even 310 on some stuff, and just get KOs all over the place. Pretty good. Hypno Splash for an extra colorless on top of that previous cost does 150 with Auto Sleep. Okay, but not really worth it to be fair. But yeah, Aqua Impact is a very strong attack, and Water's not an unreasonable type with all the fire stuff that's still playable, so it's alright. Luxray is pretty good. For a single lightning energy, this 160 HP stage 2 does 60, but it does 160 if it evolved from a Luxio this turn. So the idea is you use this with Scoop Up Net if it doesn't get immediately KO'd on the next turn, and you can scoop up the Luxio, evolve another Duder. It has to be specifically from Luxio is one problem, because it means you can't wreck Handy with this deck, and being a stage 2 that does make it really slow, but it's still an interesting card. I don't know if Pepper's actually going to play it, but he did have some interest in doing stuff with this, so we'll see. We've got another testing session before we do our actual games. Maybe we'll see it there. Garbodor is interesting, but not particularly useful for most decks. It's only got a 2 retreat this time, which is pretty good. Means Air Balloon can get it to retreat for free. That's solid for the deck it plays in, actually, because it works with this guy, who also has a 2 energy retreat. So, like, Air Balloon is solid there. If there's a Stadium card in play, you can poison the opponent's active. Would be very scary if we had the Bank still in format, but that's like 3 generations ago, so not happening there. This doesn't really see too much play because it's just really clunky, but if you rely on poison for stuff, like the Hex or like a Venoshock style effect, then it's not a bad way of generating that. That's and also just like plus 10 damage every turn, respectable enough, right? Malamar V and a VMAX doesn't really see a ton of play until way later in, but it was exceptionally good against the Mew VMAX decks when Fusion Strike came out. Mostly actually when Astral Radiance came out, so we could get to Arceus with this thing. It's 210 HP, it attacks for a dark and a colorless to do a switch plus 30 to the thing that you switch in. That's fine, that can be disruptive enough. 130 for 2 dark and a colorless with auto confuse. Not the best, but at least it's got disruption going for it, so there is that. The VMAX jumps up to 310 HP, which is honestly quite frail for a VMAX, but still, it's fine enough. Usually will tank a hit after all. And Max Jammer for the 2 dark and colorless cost does 180 and then forces the opponent to show their hand, and you bottom deck any one card that you see there. The difficulty for this at the moment is getting the energy attached, but the benefit that you would have for playing this, apart from just having a gigantic dude, is you could play this with things that already disrupt the opponent's hand, like Jesse and James or Mars and stuff like that, and be able to just shred the opponent's hand away. And most decks are not playing a dedicated like draw engine thing at the moment to get away from that, so pretty nasty. Also, bottom decking the card can be quite bad for them because it means that the deck doesn't get shuffled, so this doesn't interfere with Marnie and stuff either. Marnie plus this is a pretty crazy combo to have, so yeah, strong card, just difficult to charge. Speaking of strong cards that are probably just too clunky to charge at this point, Vikavolt is a pretty neat 150 HP dude. It's not a GX or a Pokemon V, so that's always fun. And its Powerful Storm is a Psystorm style. Well, not quite Psystorm. It's 60 plus 20 for each energy that's on all of your Pokemon. It's for a lightning and a double colorless, so the minimum damage is 120 here, but this is notable thanks to the Charger bug that we had before, which can attach itself as a special energy to a Vikavolt and provide 2 lightning energy as it does so. So you can, with enough Vikavolt in play, get up to like 8 extra energy in play on the turn. This can also use Twin Energy, which is pretty fun. It can do sometimes Speed Lightning stuff. You might not want to play many Speed Lightning because Grubbin is not on the Lightning type, so you might not play that, but you can use Tapu Koko with this as well, get some extra energy that way, and yeah, it's really powerful. Just, can we get enough Charger Bug and stuff into play? Probably not. It's probably too clunky. Still fun though. Rillaboom V and VMAX are pretty good here. 220 HP that scales up to 330, so really good for the VMAX. Forest Feast is a pretty good attack if you can't do Rowlet, Alolan, Executor stuff turn 1. For a grass energy, search your deck for up to 2 basic grasses and bench them, so get yourself set up with the Grookey's is pretty good. Woodhammer is also not an awful attack if you can't get the VMAX. For 3 grass and a colorless, it does 220, 30 to itself, but that KOs all of the like stage 1 GXs and the basic Pokemon V, so everything that isn't like a VMAX basically, or a tag team gets KO'd by this. The tag teams get KO'd by the VMAX instead. For a colorless energy, this does 50. If you hit for weakness, like Sai hit me with this with a Galarian Zigzagoon, then it is kind of funny, but obviously you don't really want to use Scratch that often. Max beating is what you really need. For the same free grass and the colorless cost, this does 130, discards up to 3 grass energy from this Pokemon, and does 50 more for each one that you discarded this way. So it caps out at 280 damage, which is enough to KO ADP. So this deck can actually be really good against the Zacian ADP stuff, because you just one-shot all of their dudes. And with Rowlet alone and Executor, you can easily get to the other Rillaboom with its super growth thing, and it's solid. Just a ton of damage potential off it there. With a single turn of setup, you can generally get the VMAX going the next turn. It's scary stuff, actually. Really powerful card. Cinderace did see one crazy person use it, so we'll mention it anyway. 210 HP, 2 retreat, but if there's a stadium in play, 0 retreat. That's fun, I suppose, for the regular bit. Lets you get to Drachis and stuff a bit more. Crimson Legs is just not very good though. 2 fire and a colorless to do 140. There are way better things that we can weld it with, but at least you could use Capture Energy as well, so there is that. The VMAX has the same attack cost for its Max Pyro Ball. That does 170 with Auto Burn. So 1, it doesn't work with Burning Scarf, because why would you need that? But 2, I mean 190 auto damage, it's the same sort of thing as what the single price Cinderace would do. That's, I suppose, kind of fun for being a better, like, easier thing to get out. 320 HP is on the average side for the VMAXs, and Counter is really what I think you would like to use, but it's just a bit tricky to do. For a fire and a colorless it does 30, but if you took damage from an attack in the opponent's last turn, you add that damage to this. It's not an outrage style attack because you don't get to do that multiple times, but it also means if you healed the Cinderace, it would still do the extra damage. So potential Hyper Potion stuff, who really knows? It's possible, not very consistent though. Not a super fan of this guy. Inteleon did see a little bit more success overall, despite Pikarom being, like, omnipresent. I think this is the hardest one to use, but it's still kind of fun nonetheless. 200 HP, so on the frailest side here. Snipe Shot for 1 water does 40 to one of the opponent's Pokemon. May finish off something that is retreated to the bench, especially with Zigzagoon pings or something, so I guess there's that. 2 water in the colorless does 130, and the opponent reveals their hand. Not really super useful, because by the time they've revealed their hand, it's their turn, and they play their hand out, so not really gaining much from that, to be fair. You just see how screwed you are for next turn. That's really the thing. Inteleon VMAX goes up to 320. I thought this would have had 310 HP, but whatever, it doesn't. That's fine by me. Same attack costs. The first attack is 1 water for 60, and you may put an energy from the opponent's active into their hand. Pairs well with like crushing hammers and stuff that you could use with it, I suppose. It's pretty reasonable. And Max Bullet for 2 water and 1 colorless does 160 and snipes 60 to one of the opponent's bench. So much better than the Black Lance that the Darkrai stuff, Darkrai Umbreon was doing, because it can be on any Pokemon. That's actually alright. This is a pretty respectable amount of damage, and like considering I'm playing Dragapult this round and it does more than Dragapult does, yeah, it's alright. Pretty good card. Eldegoss is a really crazy Pokemon V in this set. If you bench this from hand, you can put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand. This makes playing stuff like Research with a boss in hand a lot more palatable when you can go Eldegoss and pick up the boss later on in the game. Sometimes you actually want there to be a boss in your discard so that you can guarantee getting this off of like a Quick Ball or whatever. Adds to your outs of getting boss's orders for game. Float Up is also interesting. For 2 colorless energy, this does 50, and you may shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it back into the deck, so it can get out of the dodge, which is pretty reasonable. There have been a couple of people that played like a control loop deck with this guy, and you know, did the whole Shaman Sky Return type thing. Obviously, going back to the deck means you don't immediately have access to it, but we have ways of getting to it if we really need to, so it's pretty good. Also only 1 retreat, so it can get out of the active if you start with it. Pretty solid. Dubwool V is very good, actually. We've been impressed by this one in the testing stuff. 210 HP colorless Pokemon, obviously weak to fighting as a result, but that's generally fine. It takes 30 less from all attacks via its soft wall ability, so that's pretty good. Also, self damage with like Earthquake and stuff doesn't affect this either, so pretty fun there. I guess it makes sense, it's got soft wall, right? For free colorless energy, Revenge Blast does 120 plus 30 for each prize the opponent has taken, so it's basically stolen Shaman's attack, but it has 120 base on this as well, which is very respectable in its own right. Yeah, at one prize remaining, it would technically do 270. You can scale this in the right decks to actually KO VMAXs, which is very funny, but mostly you're going to be hitting either 180 or 240 depending on what the situation is. If you can stick this on the odd prize turn though, it's pretty respectable. Bolton V is another jolt to the Pikarom deck because again, that deck totally needed to get stronger, right? 200 HP, so it's fine. Like, it could be better, but that's reasonable for something this strong, to be fair. 2 retreat generally doesn't matter because Zeraora is still played. Electrify for 1 lightning energy does double energy search. Search your deck for up to 2 lightning and attach them to your bench in any way that you like. So yeah, pretty respectable. Means that you get to do like a mini full blitz. It doesn't do the damage, but for a single energy on a 2-prizer, that's pretty good. Bolt Storm is what makes this very strong though. For a lightning and the colorless, this only does 10, but it does 30 more for each lightning that's on all of your Pokemon. So it's like a super version of the Raichu that I played before. And yeah, this is one of the things that Sai's going to play, I think, because he's been playing it a fair while. This is the first Pikarom deck that he's actually gotten to play, and it's really, really good. So, well worth showing off. Colossal is something I've been impressed with, actually. I didn't think much of it initially, but paired with the card over here, there's some actual potential for this thing. It's a 160 HP dude. It's a stage 2, obviously, but we can work around that, it's fine. Once during your turn, you can attach a fire, a fighting, or one of each of basic energy cards from your discard to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So, not only do we have Accelerate 2 energy from the discard, they can go to the active, but they can also get split in any way that makes sense. This card is insane, to be honest with you. Being a once per turn per Colossal as well means that you can accelerate a dummy amount of energy if you get enough in play. Looks to be really, really good. The problem, of course, is what do you actually use it with? And, well, Ninetales is pretty good, Dubwool is pretty good, and the Sandaconda we'll talk about in just a little bit is the other one that, like, synergizes best with this, I think. It does have a regular attack as well, fighting triple colorless to do 130. It's in a good type, so you can KO like Pikarom and Raichu with this and stuff like that, so that's kind of fun. Also gets damage modded up, so you can actually hit about 180 damage with this, respectively. It's alright. Really strong card overall. It's just like getting it out is the difficult bit. That's fine, because, I mean, play this very similarly to the Magnezone thing I did before, and it's actually really good. Flapple is a weird one. This is an 80 HP dude. I think you're supposed to use this with Turffield, to be fair, and like Netball to get the Applins out. Applin only has 40 HP though, so really awkward, to be honest. Once per turn, you can put 2 damage counters on one of the opponent's Pokemon, and then shuffle this guy back into the deck. Yeah, it's like the Kingdra or Feather Arrow, I suppose, is from Decidueye. It's probably the closest example, but it then puts itself back into the deck, so you've got to build it up again. I don't think our search stuff is quite good enough for this right now, but with things like Level Ball eventually coming into the format as well, there's like a time for it. I just don't think it's impactful enough personally. The Acid Spray attack is cool for a twin energy, 60 damage, and if you flip heads it discards an energy if any opponent's active, so if you play this for like Crushing Hammers and stuff, maybe you can disrupt there, but it's an 80 HP stage 1, it's just not going to happen, let's be fair. Then we move on to the Sandaconda. 220 HP, really big. Free energy retreat is sort of annoying, but we don't really retreat outside of Switch and like scoop up stuff in that deck anyway, so who really cares? Sand Eater is an interesting attack for fighting. It does 30 and attaches a fighting from the discard to itself. Normally I don't like these kinds of attacks, but if you use this at the very start of the game, you're often going to survive the next hit, and Sand Breath is actually pretty good with this attack. For 2 fighting and a colorless, it does 220 damage, and discards 2 energy from this Pokemon. So 220 for free is a really good sort of conversion ratio. It does KO almost all of the regular Pokemon V, including itself actually, which is pretty funny. So that by itself is really good, but being in fighting, we can scale that damage up again, like up to maybe 60 extra damage on average. So we can actually KO stuff like ADP as well, which is pretty good if we're behind on prizes. And the fact of it takes a colorless in its energy cost means that you can use this with a fire energy in the discard via the Colossal. So you accelerate fighting and fire to this guy, discard fighting fire at the end of the turn to do the attack, and that means you can very easily stream this as well, which is really good. Also frees up your other energy attachment to go to other Pokemon. Very cool card. Very aggressive too, which I quite like. So yeah. Then we get to Toxtricity V and the VMAX over here. These rely on Poison as their main thing. 210 HP scaling up to 320, so on the average kind of side here. Poison Jab, just 20 for Lightning and Auto Poison. If you have to use it, sure, it might be at the very start of the game. Not particularly good, mind you. Both the other attacks are for 2 Lightning and a Colorless, and they do base damage plus more damage if the opponent's active is poisoned. For the regular V, it is 90 plus 90, and for the VMAX, it is 160 plus 80. The problem is that 250, which is what this effectively scales to thanks to the poison damage, doesn't really matter. Like, the difference between doing this and, say, 180 damage is usually not that impactful. The main difference is that you KO basic Pokemon V with this, but you've got to set up multiple stage 1s because you need Garbodor in play generally for this as well. And then you've also got to play a bunch of energy down on this guy. Do we need Thunder Mountain in play so we can make the cost cheaper? We don't have as good an acceleration setup without Pikarom, but then that's just kind of doesn't need this. So it's a bit of a weird spot right now. Koga's Trap could be used to get the poison on this as well, instead of using the Garbodor. It is a supporter though, so it might not end up working out. Then we get to Hatterene. This would be a control card if the fact of a stage 2 is what this is, you know, like if that wasn't the problem. But it is, so whatever. 150 HP stage 2 that once per turn makes both players discard a card from their hand. The opponent discards first, but that usually isn't going to matter too much unless you know what their hand is. Maybe you know that you don't like Marnie them or something if they discard a supporter or whatever. Doesn't really matter. Dripping Grudge is actually an attack that's shared by a Spiritomb in this set as well. Spiritomb does it for Dark and Colorless, but basically you put a damage counter on the opponent's active for each Pokemon in your discard pile. So the idea is that this thing can let you discard Pokemon out of your hand so that you can then do more damage with the Grudge. But the fact that it's a stage 2 and therefore needs a lot of Pokemon on the field to get itself out really diminishes the amount of damage it can do. So, like, this needs to be on a basic Pokemon for it to actually be, like, playable. And that's what the Spiritomb is supposed to do. But then Spiritomb is a 60 HP dude, and it doesn't solve the problems of this guy. So, yeah. The discard could be very nasty, but most of the time not going to happen. Phalanx and Phalanx V do actually work together, surprisingly enough. Phalanx is 90 HP basic that can call for family is kind of neat. Search depth for it to 2 basics, put them onto the bench. Means you can get 2 Phalanx V, which then reduces the damage that your Phalanx Pokemon take by 20 per one that's out. So if you get all 4 of them, minus 80 damage. Makes up for their frailty a little bit here. And then the actual team attack for Twin Energy does 30 for each of your benched Pokemon that have Phalanx in their name. Doesn't include the active, which is really irritating, is basically the same thing what Passimian did. That makes it super frustrating. But you do 150 for a Twin Energy on a single prizer. That's not awful. It's a bit difficult to get Martial Arts Dojo to pair with that as well, but you can certainly do it. So yeah, fun times with that. The Phalanx V itself does 210 for 2 fighting and a colorless energy, but it can't use that attack next turn. Only 2 energy to retreat though, or you could switch and then just go from there. So respectable finishing damage here. You probably want to play Finding Energy anyway because Martial Arts Dojo would help there. So we could do some work with this. Early pressure with a single prizer, finishings off with a two prizer seems respectable enough to me. Fighting is a good type to hit weakness with, so maybe next set with Eternatus, who knows. Corporaja V and VMAX are the tank VMAX in this set. 220 HP going into 340, the same sort of thing as what Snorlax ended up doing. Adamantite, like, they've got very expensive attacks though. 2 metal and colorless, 3 metal and colorless is the attacks for both of them. First attack on the V does 90 and reduces damage by 30 next turn, fair enough I suppose. Second attack does 180, not bad for something that evolves to be fair. And then the VMAX itself does 100 plus 100 more if the opponent's active is a basic, that's fine enough. And then 240 for its big attack here. 240 is pretty reasonable because if you played this in ADP, you would be able to hit 270 after that, which is pretty good. It's a little bit clunky to play, but it is also very, very tanky, and therefore actually like takes more punishment than Zacian can. It's a less frail option to go into, so that's always fun. Both of them have 4 retreat as well, so you can buff padding with them, which is pretty solid. There's something there. I think it does come up once or twice, but yeah, obviously Zacian is a bit more consistent now. Metal Sorcerer is still pretty good with them as well though, as well as this Duraludon over here. For a colorless energy, this 130 HP dude has the Metal Sharpener attack to do 30 and accelerate a metal from the discard to one of your Pokemon. Always worth noting this kind of thing, because these acceleration attacks have been good ever since they became like mainstream from Yveltal back at the start of Gen 6. And this one can do it for a capture energy, which is something you can still play with these guys because they have a colorless in their attack cost. So yeah, very respectable. Combine this with Metal Sorcerer and you can do a lot of setup stuff with this. Pretty good. Finally, we have the Dragapult that I will be playing this round because I've been really enjoying this deck so far. Both the V and the VMAX are worth noting here. The V, they both attack for, again, the mirrored energy costs, 1 Psychic and 2 Psychic. The Dragapult V has got 210 HP, 30 damage for 1 Psychic, not really too relevant, but sometimes that chip is needed. Jet Assault is the attack we care about here. 60 plus 80 if this Pokemon moved from bench to active this turn. Very similar to First Impression from the Golisopod back in Gen 7. 140 is technically more damage than the VMAX can do in one shot. The VMAX has got a Shred attack for 60 for 1 energy. This goes through all effects on the opponent's active, so if they play like I don't know, it'll be Decidueye in the next set that's immune to stuff from Pokemon B and GX and whatnot. You can shred through it at the very least. Max Phantom does 130 and puts 5 damage counters on the opponent's bench in any way that you like. So you can set up some really nasty bosses orders plays and stuff with this as well, which is pretty good. Yeah, it takes a hit fairly well. It's got 320 HP after all. And Jet Assault is not bad to have around. If you have just 1 Malamar in place so you can keep cycling through these, they only have 1 retreat. You can play a skateboard with this too. Get around the paralysis stuff. That's potentially a problem. So yeah, really good cards overall. And I've been impressed with how well the deck has performed despite the damage output looking really low. Gotta play this set though, because the next set is dark focused. That weakness is not looking great. So there we go, we have a pretty fun set here to be honest. There's a fair few cards I'm interested in here. The Ninetales, Colossal, Sandaconda stuff is really good, Dubwool is good for a lot of decks, Dragapult has been very solid for me so far, Milotic is something I've been testing, it's been reasonable, maybe not the strongest but it's still pretty good, and the Rillaboom deck is insane. Like, that is absolutely one of the best decks of this round. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff to see. Hopefully, we will see some of those come up in the battles. And until then, thank you very much for listening. Hopefully you found this interesting. And until next time, take care.